The first thing you notice is the silence. Not the peaceful quiet of a winter morning, but a thick, heavy silence, broken only by the scuttling of rats and the whisper of ash falling like black snow. It is the silence of a city being systematically erased. Warsaw, 1940, a city of ghosts and whispers, where a wall now separates the living from the living dead. This is not a story about the wall. This is a story about what festered and then flourished behind it. This is the story of the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising, not as a dry chapter in a history book, but as a symphony of desperation, engineered by a handful of young people who decided that how they died would matter more than how long they lived. And at the heart of this symphony was a weapon more unlikely than any bomb, a mimeograph machine. Her name was Zivia Lubetkin. At 26, her face was already a map of a lost world. She had the dark, determined eyes of someone who had seen everything she loved taken away piece by piece. Her university, her friends, her future. Now she stood in a cramped, airless room on Anielewicz Street, the air pungent with the smell of ink and damp plaster. In her hands, she held not a rifle, but a freshly printed newsletter. The headline, in stark Yiddish, read, "We will not bow our heads." This single sheet of paper was more dangerous in that moment than a cache of grenades. It was a declaration that the Nazis had not yet won the war for their souls. The ghetto, a district of just 1.3 square miles crammed with over 400,000 Jews, was a meticulously designed machine for death. Hunger was the primary weapon. The official daily ration was 184 calories. People dropped dead in the streets, their bodies covered with newspapers until the cart came by. Children with swollen bellies and skeletal limbs begged for crusts of bread that did not exist. The Nazis called this Verhungerungspolitik, the policy of starvation. It was meant to break them, to turn them into animals concerned only with survival, to make them complicit in their own annihilation. But Zivia and her comrades in the Zydowska Organizacja Bojowa, the Jewish Combat Organization, ZOB, were fighting back with the only weapon they had in abundance: information. The mimeograph machine, smuggled in piece by piece, was their arsenal. It didn't just print words, it printed oxygen. It told people that the rumors were true, that the resettlement in the East was a lie, that Treblinka was not a labor camp, but a factory of death. It gave instructions on how to build bunkers, how to make Molotov cocktails from kitchen sugar and gasoline, how to recognize the telltale signs of a Gestapo informant. Their leader was Mordecai Anielewicz, a boyish-looking 23-year-old with a poet's soul and a general's mind. He understood that their rebellion was not about winning a military victory. That was impossible. It was about creating a story that would outlive them. The dream of my life has been realized. I have lived to see a Jewish defense in the ghetto in all its greatness and glory.
The ghetto was a universe of its own, a distorted mirror of the world outside. There were symphony orchestras that played Beethoven in condemned theaters, surgeons who performed amputations without anesthesia by candlelight, and black market kings who traded in sacks of flour that cost a fortune. There was despair so profound it was a physical presence, a cold fog that seeped into the bones. And then there was the ZOB, a flicker of defiant heat in the endless winter. Their preparations were a masterpiece of desperate ingenuity. They dug bunkers deep beneath the tenement buildings, intricate, multi-level subterranean cities with their own water wells, ventilation shafts, and electric generators. They connected cellars and attics across entire city blocks, creating a secret network of passageways. They collected weapons through a network of astonishing bravery. A Polish underground courier named Henryk Wolinski risked his life daily to smuggle in a handful of pistols. A single revolver cost 10,000 zloty on the black market. A rifle was a fortune. Their entire arsenal, when the final fight came, consisted of a few dozen pistols, a handful of rifles, several hundred homemade grenades, and thousands of Molotov cocktails. The enemy they faced was not a faceless monster, but a specific, efficient one. SS Brigadeführer Jürgen Stroop, a man whose ambition was as cold as the Polish winter. His mission, handed down from Himmler himself, was to liquidate the ghetto as a birthday present for the Führer. He arrived with over 2,000 soldiers, backed by artillery, flamethrowers, and armored vehicles. He expected to complete the operation in 3 days. He was a man who believed in overwhelming force, in the absolute supremacy of the German war machine. He did not believe in the power of a micrographed leaflet. The uprising began on the morning of April 19, 1943, the eve of Passover. The irony was not lost on the Jewish fighters. As German columns, confident and gleaming, marched into the ghetto, they were met not with submission, but with a storm of fire. From attics, from sewer grates, from behind burnt-out husks of buildings, the ZOV struck. Molotov cocktails arced through the air, turning tanks into infernos. Snipers' bullets, precious and few, found their marks. The German soldiers, who had been told they were dealing with Untermenschen, subhumans, froze in confusion and then in terror. The streets, which were supposed to be a parade ground for their victory, became a killing field. Zivia was in a command bunker at 18 Mila Street, the nerve center of the rebellion. The air was thick with the smell of gunpowder, sweat, and radio static. Reports flooded in from the fighting groups. Group led by Ari Rilner was holding the Brushmakers district. Mikhail Klefisch's unit was using their few grenades to devastating effect. The fighters, many of them teenagers who had never held a gun before, fought with a ferocity that stunned their attackers. They were not soldiers, they were students, tailors, and poets. They were fighting for the right to a memory. Stroop was furious. His 3-day operation was turning into a bloody quagmire. He abandoned military tactics for sheer brutal terror. He ordered his troops to burn the ghetto, building by building. They used flamethrowers to turn entire city blocks into roaring pyramids of flame. They pumped poison gas into the bunkers. The sky above Warsaw turned black with smoke, day and night. The heat was so intense that the cobblestones in the streets glowed. From their bunker, now filling with smoke and the desperate cries of the wounded, the ZOB commanders directed the battle. They were no longer fighting for territory, but for time. Every hour they held out was a victory. Every German soldier they killed was a message to the world. They communicated through a network of young couriers, mostly girls like Tosia Altmann and Frumka Plotnicka, who could blend into the shadows, slipping through sewers and ruined buildings to carry messages between the isolated fighting groups. Their courage was a different kind of weapon, silent and just as deadly. After 3 weeks, the main bunker at 18 Mila Street was surrounded. On May 8th, the Germans pumped gas into the ventilation shafts. Knowing capture and torture were imminent, and rather than give the Nazis the satisfaction, many of the leaders, including Mordecai Anielewicz, took their own lives. Zivia, along with a handful of others, managed to escape through a sewer outlet at the last possible moment. The official end came on May 16, 1943. To symbolize his triumph, Stroop ordered the destruction of the Great Synagogue on Tilomatsky Street, which lay just outside the ghetto walls. As the magnificent building exploded in a ball of fire, he famously cabled his superiors in Berlin, "The Jewish quarter of Warsaw is no more." But he was wrong. The Warsaw Ghetto Uprising lasted for 27 days, longer than the entire country of Poland had been able to hold out against the German Blitzkrieg in 1939. It was the first large-scale urban rebellion in Nazi-occupied Europe. It was a beacon that inspired uprisings in other ghettos and concentration camps, from Treblinka to Sobibor. Zivia Lubetkin survived. She fought later in the Warsaw Polish Uprising of 1944 and lived to see the end of the war. She testified at the trial of Adolf Eichmann. She helped found a kibbutz in Israel. She carried the story. The Nazis, with all their panzer divisions and their master race ideology, are gone, consigned to the ash heap of history. But the story of the ZOB, of Zivia and Mordecai, and the micrograph machine that printed hope in a world of darkness is still told. It is a story that whispers from the ruins, a defiant, enduring proof that even when all that remains is a single fragile sheet of paper, the human spirit is the most powerful weapon of all.